Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Book Trek 2024, the Summer of Trek. This is a BookTube event created by Captain Vin of the USS Revenant, of Revenant Reads, to read Star Trek fiction all summer long. And I've been a little dilatory, a little bit behind on Star Trek fiction. I've been reading a lot of other stuff. But I love reading Star Trek fiction. And like I think most of the co-hosts, the Dauntless Bridge crew of Book Trek, I've mostly loved reading Star Trek fiction in the summer. I don't quite know why that is. It's an interesting thing to think about. I feel the same way about science fiction just in general. I'm having a blast with Rocket Summer, for instance, a July BookTube event about classic science fiction. It feels right to read science fiction in the summer. For the last 16 days, or 10 or 11 days, it's been boiling hot here in Boston. And I suspect that I'm not the only person in the world who's grateful for the little AC unit and its ability to cool off the room, but I hate the way it makes the air feel, even how it makes the air taste. I prefer just getting by in the heat. I would do that exclusively if my little dog didn't overheat, but she does. But there have been mornings and late evenings where the air conditioning unit wasn't necessary and where the warmth, that fragrant, warm air of high summer, could enter in through the windows and change out the musty air of a closed-off room. And the smell of that air, the feel of it, always reminds me of reading science fiction and also Star Trek, and also seeing Star Trek. So I love the timing of Book Trek. I'm sorry that I've neglected it so much. I'll try to do better as the summer wears on. But I did put a Star Trek book on my pile for last night, and it was a reread. Which I'm going to do quite a bit of that also for the rest of Book Trek, but I did a reread here, not of an old favorite of mine, although I was strongly tempted to reread Strangers from the Sky by Margaret Wander Bonanno, because one of our co-hosts for Book Trek has never read it. So I was severely tempted to reread it. I may still do that, but instead, I reread something that is not a favorite. I wanted to see how it would stand up to a second appraisal. So I read a modern Star Trek novel, but not modern Star Trek. It's the original Star Trek. It's the original crew. It's the original series, and it's this. It's by Greg Cox, and it's called The Rings of Time. The commission cover here, not a dumb Photoshop thing. Quite nice, and very much intended, I think, to be a throwback to classic Trek fiction. And this has two timelines. In one, in the Enterprise, the normal Enterprise, NCC 1701, they encounter a human colony on a rock distantly orbiting a ringed gas giant. And the human colony their survival is precarious anyway, but their survival is now directly endangered by the fact that the ring system of that gas giant seems to be breaking up. Something seems to be breaking up. It's not a natural thing. And there's an odd alien probe entering the solar system, and surely those two things are connected. But the main thing the Enterprise has to worry about is, what do we do? We can't stick around and just blast things out of the sky and protect this colony all day long. So we need to come up with a solution, either to stop the dissolution of the rings or something else. The nearest human habitable planet is a long way away. So there's a mission here that doesn't necessarily involve Romulan shapeshifters or anything like that. And that's endearing to see. It's endearing to see the Enterprise crew go about their job. This is the job of a starship. Exactly this kind of thing. The Starfleet has dreadnoughts and destroyers and cutters for explicitly military engagements. The Enterprise, Constitution class, is, yes, it's a flying superfortress, as one character refers to it, but it's got tons of science labs. It's there to seek out new life and new civilization. It's there to explore. It's just an incredibly heavily armed exploratory vehicle because you know what you're going to be facing, right? You can't just be an exploratory vessel. You have to be incredibly well armed. The crew of the Enterprise in Star Trek Enterprise learns that fact the hard way in one of the best episodes of Star Trek Enterprise. But that isn't the only storyline in this book. There's also another storyline that takes place much earlier, but that also involves a ringed planet. In this case, Saturn itself. The other timeline in this storyline is the first manned expedition to Saturn. led by Colonel Sean Jeffrey Christopher. And those of you who know your original Star Trek backwards and forwards will know exactly who that refers to, because there's a great episode in which the Enterprise goes back in time accidentally to the 20th century. They accidentally take on board an Air Force pilot. They crush his ship by accident again, and they don't know what to do with him. They can't leave him on board. They have to return him to his own time. They're wondering, though, can he just go missing? Or will he affect the timeline? And there's a great scene where Mr. Spock says that we do, in fact, have to return Captain Christopher to his time period. And Captain Christopher has already essentially been told that you didn't make a difference, so why would you? Why would you need to do that? And Kirk and company mention that, well, your son, Colonel Sean Jeffrey Christopher, will lead the first manned expedition to Saturn. No you, no him. And Captain Christopher says, well, I don't have a son. It's a wonderful, wonderful moment. It's not my favorite moment in the episode. That episode is full of great moments. But we go back. Greg Cox gives us that expedition. And it turns out in that expedition that the rings of Saturn are also fragmenting apart, and there is also a mysterious alien probe entering Earth's system. Long, long before Kirk and company find a similar probe doing something similar to a similar ringed gas giant. So I read this when it first came out. I wrote a review of it. I keep making promises to link pertinent reviews and videos, and I keep failing. I'm going to try to remember today to link my review of this book. I had a blast reviewing it, but I thought it was lopsided. Actually, a lot of you who read the contemporary trend in historical fiction of dual timelines, it's incredibly vogue. You can barely swing a dead cat without hitting a book like that in every publishing season these days. And those of you who read a lot of those, I think would probably agree with me that it's very seldom that the dual time frames are equally done well. And that's true with this book as well. The Sean Jeffrey Christopher parts are much more interesting than the Enterprise going about its business trying to save this colony world. And I wish that hadn't been true. I was reading the book, I was rereading it last night, and I was thinking, okay, that was your original judgment. Is it true? Or is there more nuance to the Enterprise parts of this novel than you were giving it credit? And instead of thinking, oh, there was a lot more nuance, I was thinking, boy, I know how to fix this. I know why the Enterprise parts of this are so dull. Especially, I know why the main reason is that the characters are not allowed to interact with each other in the way that they would. They know each other very well by now, and they have the freedom that comes with knowing your coworkers really well of airing your disagreements openly on the surface, because you know that nothing will come of it. I wish that the parts of the Enterprise in this book had been more dynamic. Certainly the crew interactions of Sean Jeffrey Christopher and his crew and their stowaway are much more interesting. I did enjoy it second time around. My review is the final word on this book, of course, as my review of any book is the final word on that book. And I didn't really have cause to disagree with. I didn't really have cause to second guess myself on this at all. So it was a reread, and it was enjoyable, definitely. But I think I want a fresh read next, so I will go looking for that, for a Trek book to add tonight, and I'll report back. So there you go, The Rings of Time. I have now done a written review of this thing and also a video review of it. What more, I don't know. Interpretive dance. So I'll wrap this up. I'm curious to know if you're doing book trek, how your book trek is going. Have you read any Star Trek this summer so far? But I'll be back with something else, about something else. So I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.